Jonny, I love you.
Love you. Yeah.
All right. We'll give everything a second for everybody to connect here.
Oh, wow.
Welcome, everybody.
Oh, wait, we're on camera. Everyone can see how excited we are.
Yes.
We're supposed to be like a dramatic reveal.
Yeah. If Jonny just falls over, does that count as a dramatic reveal? Oh, everyone is in for a very exciting evening tonight. Again, we're just kind of waiting. I see the folks are all connecting, so we will give everybody a second to join here. I don't want anybody to feel like they're missing a single moment of what is sure to be a super fun evening tonight. Yes, many exclamation points in the chat. I know you're all as excited. I'm not sure you're as excited as Jonny and Sarah are, but it's going to be good. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ginny, and I am with Anderson's Bookshops, and I'm so excited to welcome Jonny Sun and Sarah K to this virtual event tonight, and all of you from joining us from all over the country. This, of course, a virtual author event. We're really glad to have you with us. I know this means that you need to keep your eyes on another screen, but we're really thankful that you do that and appreciate your time. For those of you who are not familiar with us, Anderson's is an independent bookstore. It means we're actually run and owned by the Anderson family and have been for going on 6 generations. So we have quite a legacy in the community that we're quite proud of. But your support at these events means that we can continue to do this, both in virtual form while we need to be, and then whatever the future is going to look like, we'll be able to handle that as well. So thank you for your support. It really means a lot to us that you've taken the time out of your night to spend some time with us tonight. Normally we would be doing this in person and having everybody lined up and squeeing in person. But of course, this is what we've got right now. But hopefully this ties everybody over and means that it's a little less time commitment with the same amount of reward. But we do have lots of other virtual events coming up. We've got Nigella Lawson this week, Mary Kubica, Katie Quinn from YouTube is going to be a book about, it's called Cheese, Wine, and Bread. And I'm kind of like, sign me up, what everybody needs right now. So lots of other things for all ages, all interests. So please join us for our next one. You can find all our events at andersonsbookshop.com. But today we are celebrating Goodbye Again, Jonny's newest book. If you ordered a copy of the book from us, there it is. Yes, in all its glory. Yes, with the matching leaves in the background, you might spot as well. If you ordered a copy of the book from us for this event, you are getting a signed copy, and there were a number of special edition pins that we will be giving out to the first folks who purchase tickets as well. So that's a nice little extra bonus here. But I would like to officially introduce Jonny and Sarah. So Jonny Sun is the best-selling author and illustrator of Everyone's an Alien When You're an Alien Too. Yeah, no. You should revel in all of these accomplishments. He's also the illustrator of Good Morning, Good Night by our friend Lin-Manuel Miranda. His new book, Goodbye Again, is a collection of essays. He was a writer for the Emmy-nominated 6th season of the Netflix original series BoJack Horseman. His work has appeared in The New Yorker and McSweeney's, and Time Magazine named him as one of 25 most influential people on the internet. As a doctoral candidate at MIT, he studies virtual place and online community. He received his master's degree in architecture from Yale and his bachelor's degree in engineering from the University of Toronto. And I feel like I need to get my life in gear here. And Sarah K, we're so happy to have joining us, is a poet, performer, educator, and the founder of Project Voice, an organization that uses spoken word poetry to entertain, educate, and empower students and teachers worldwide, which is an excellent message today, especially. So thank you to both of you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Kitty.
Yay.
Hooray.
All right, guys, take it away.
Oh no, all the adults are gone. We're in charge.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to Ginny for the introduction. Thank you to Anderson's for hosting this. Thank you to all of you, wherever you are in the world in whatever respective time zones. I really like that this event was listed in Central Time. Respect. Gotta, like, you come to Chicago, you honor the time zone that we're in, which I love. So thank you everyone for being here. I want to say a big shout out. I know that Johnny's parents are watching this. My parents are watching this. Johnny's wife Elisa's parents are watching this. Just a bunch of parents who are beloved. Shout out to parents. We also want to start out by saying that we are sending a lot of love to George Floyd's family and loved ones, and all of the city of Minneapolis. Our heart is with you tonight. So thinking of them and holding them in our hearts as we try to find a little space for community here in this little virtual room. Thank you for being here. Jonny, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for joining me as well. It's lovely to be here.
So let me tell the people what we're gonna do. You and I are gonna chat for about, I don't know, half hour or so. Oh no, wait, before we even do that, I'm too excited. You're gonna share some of the book with us first.
Oh yes.
And then we're gonna chat. And then we'll have an opportunity for folks to ask questions. There should be a place on your Zoom that says Q&A. And so at any point, if you want to drop your own questions into the Q&A box, at the end, I will make sure that I have, I can like quickly scan through and ask Jonny some of your questions. So definitely put them in the Q&A box. You can use the chat, but I can't look at all of those things at one time. So put them in the Q&A box. Before Jonny shares a part of this book, I want to say, to like fully embarrass him, sometimes when people do events like this, they get too excited to like get into the reading and the sharing and the questions and the whatever, but like we're here to launch this book, which means that if you do not already have this book in your hands right now, that you should have already ordered it. If you haven't already ordered it, might I suggest you order it from Anderson's, which would be an awesome thing to do to support an indie bookshop. I'm hoping that Ginny is going to drop the link into the chat where you can buy this book through Anderson's, which would be awesome. Jonny is doing a bunch of events all kind of for the rest of the month, I think. So tell your friends about this, tell your friends to buy this book, like buy the book. I can't say it enough, buy the book. You don't get to enjoy the rest of this if you don't click the link now.
No,
okay.
Sarah, you're brilliant. The link is in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, now that the big sell is done, Jonny, I would love it if you would share a little bit of this book with us, just a couple selections. This will be the first time people get to hear you read this book.
It's so exciting. I also wanted to say, thank you for everyone for coming. And one of the benefits of doing this all virtually is that if you want, you can come again to another talk and see how my answers probably get a little more eloquent to some of these questions, because it is the first time I'm really talking about this book. And I'm so grateful to you, Sarah, for doing this with me. You launched my first book with me in New York, and also officiated my wedding. And so it's so nice that you've been my friend through so many things. I guess I'll start. I wanted to share the dedication of the book. First, it's right here, and it just says, "For my parents, who I have said goodbye to more than anyone else," which I suppose is in itself its own kind of blessing. And as Sarah mentioned, many parents are here. Sarah's parents are here. My wife Elisa's parents are here, and my parents are here. And just wanted to read that to say hello to all of them, and especially my parents, who I owe a lot of this book to. And my brother, because my mom will yell at me if I don't mention that my brother also exists and that I love him. So let's start. I'm going to read a piece called Particles from the middle of the book. Particles. I think to get to the point where I can understand that I've changed, I have to dissociate from any past version of myself first. I have to treat those past versions of myself as outside of me, so I can see how I'm different from those past selves. But when I dissociate my past from my present too cleanly, when I don't acknowledge that I'm still in some way my past selves, I think that everything I've ever done has been done by a younger me who I no longer am. And everything I aspire to do needs to be done by an older me who I am not yet. And so present me is always doing, never having done, and never achieving anything. Present me is the most useless version of myself. And I worry that I'll feel this way at every point in my life. But what makes me feel a little better is telling myself that I am an older me to my past selves and a younger me to my future selves. And since present me is able to look at my past and future selves with some sort of admiration, that they are the ones who either have accomplished or will accomplish, it means that there are always people, my past selves and my future selves, who are looking at me like that too. Sometimes this adds pressure. I think, oh, I have to hold the expectations of not only myself, but all these other people now too. And I'm not letting just myself down, but letting all those versions of myself down as well. But for the most part, it helps me to know that I have been and will be thought of with some sort of kindness when I can't muster that for myself right now. There are past versions of me who believe in me, and there are future versions of me who are looking back on where I am and thinking, that's the version of me who actually managed to achieve something. There are always these people cheering me on, or at least thinking about me. And that helps me feel less alone. And that helps me feel like I am right where I need to be. Thank you, Sarah, for telling me to read that one. I'm gonna read another one now called, should have bookmarked.
If we were in a physical room with all these people, you'd be able to hear them all clapping. So I will play the role of the crowd tonight.
It's lovely. I can see the little chat pop-ups and I'm like, oh, this is fun. This is like we're all in a little chat room together. All right. This next piece is called Pothos. And I'm gonna share my screen. All right, Pothos. This is a pothos plant right here. Actually, no, this is a philodendron. So it is not a pothos, but anyway, it looks like a pothos. I could have just not said that at all and no one would have noticed. And also I am clearly stalling because this is the first time I'm reading this book publicly. All right, Pothos. I read that pothos plants are able to thrive in pretty low light, so I kept ours in the back corner of our apartment, far from the window. I watered it regularly and it grew and seemed to be totally healthy and unbothered by its low light situation, so I was happy that what I read was right. Except that after a few weeks of sitting in the corner, I noticed that the plant was growing quite lopsidedly toward the window, leaves reaching, aching toward the light. It looked unbalanced, only growing to one side, and because I couldn't move the window to the other side of the plant, I rotated the pot so that the other side of the plant would face the window. Elisa said to stop messing with it, that moving it around would disturb the plant, but I thought that it began to look better after a few weeks in its new orientation. It was a little more balanced, its leaves now reaching out to the window on its other side too. The only thing that seemed unbalanced now was that the limbs that were originally reaching to the window seemed to notice that they were no longer facing the window, and so they had turned around, reaching for the light that was now behind them. As the limbs of the pothos grew longer and longer, their reaching, their yearning, got more noticeable. One afternoon, this made me finally feel guilty enough for keeping the plant in its dark, perfectly fine, low-lit corner that I moved it right up to the window, placing it directly into the light, so it could have what it was reaching for. A few days later, its leaves started to turn pale and brown. It had burned in the sun. The end.
Ah!
Yay! How are we on time? We're good on time. All right, I'll read a couple more. This next one, let me get the images up. Oh no, gosh. All right. This next one is called Visiting Sadness. Visiting sadness. I'm always sad when I think about happiness leaving, but I've started to understand that sadnesses can leave too. I've been trying lately to welcome sadness like a bird that's come to perch on a branch nearby for a moment. I try to just sit quietly and observe its details, to try to understand what is unique and special and different about this bird, to try to take note of what features I can use to identify it before it flies away. I find a little bit of happiness, or maybe at least comfort, in observing these sadnesses, and in identifying them with enough resolution that I'm able to recognize them when they approach. And when they approach, I let them in to join all the other sadnesses visiting me at the moment. I've started to let sadnesses visit whenever they come because I know that trying to keep them out will just cause them to find another, more aggressive way in. And when they visit, I try to sit with them and understand the different nuances between these visitors, to take stock of them and note how each of them makes me feel. It helps me realize that they're not all the same, that sadness is not just one consistently gray, same feeling blob, but that there are different kinds of sadnesses, some more common, some more rare. And when they visit, I've started to find some form of small excitement in the fact that these are the only chances I get to feel them and to observe their details firsthand. It becomes a form of bird watching in a way. And when I take the time to observe how I feel when each of them is around, I can identify when I don't feel those feelings any longer. That means they have gone, at least for a moment. And after doing this long enough, I have submitted to the fact, or the feeling perhaps, that each of these specific sadnesses is going to return, likely again and again over the course of my life. But for each sadness to return, it first has to leave. All right, yay. All right, this next one is actually the next one in sequence of the book too. And oh, Sarah, we didn't plan this before, but you were like, if there's anything I could do to help with the reading, would you just read like the numbers counting down for this one, just like 15 and 14 and the next number, which is 13. All right, this one, someone shared this on, someone posted a picture of this like essay title on Twitter earlier, which I would love if all of you did. If there's any pieces in the book that you love or that you particularly feel resonates with you, I'd love to like see it and hear about it, because I've been sitting with this book for 3 years by myself, and it's really nice to finally get to be able to share it. But someone posted the essay title of this one, and I think it's one of the most difficult pieces in the book, but I'm also really proud of it because the premise of this is, what if a BuzzFeed listicle existed, except it were the most emotionally devastating listicle that you could ever read? And I think in general love the idea of like taking something that feels like you can't really mine any sadness out of, and then try to make it feel as sad as possible. So this is a listicle called Your Last 15 Minutes Before the End of the World, ranked from worst to best. So, Sarah.
15.
Minute 15. Seeing for the first time an alert that the world will end in 15 minutes. The feeling of a lurching stomach and a sweating that will not stop, waiting for a breathing that will not start.
14.
Minute 4. Realizing fully without hope how truly little time you have left. 4 minutes may be enough time on average to listen to a favorite song of yours in full one final time, but perhaps not long enough to properly deliberate among all the options for what song that should be, to make a fully thought out choice on which one you want to hear, and then still have enough time left to play it all the way through. Not knowing what else to do, you decide to go with silence and move your furniture around so that you can sit and look directly out the window and up at the sun, and at least feel the daylight flooding in.
13.
Minute 11. Finding out the reason why the world is ending, confirming that yes, the world will end, that all this news is real, and being filled with a rage and a hopelessness and a complete and utter lack of surprise, a feeling of, oh, well, of course this is how it's all going to end. Of course it is. Of course.
12.
Minute 7. Listening too long to the ringing as you try to FaceTime your mom.
11.
Minute 10. The deep anxiety in realizing that 5 minutes have already passed since you found out that the world was going to end, and that you would do anything to get those 5 minutes back.
10.
Minute 5. Being on a group FaceTime with your entire family, being grateful that at least in this small way you are together, even though you're not saying anything at all, even though you're all just crying, and you're just watching your mom take screenshot after screenshot of her own screen, even though there is no reason to save any more screenshots any longer. Every few seconds, she will accidentally fail to press the lock button and the volume button at the exact same time, and her video will go dark because she accidentally locks the screen, and your heart will plummet. But then you hear her voice saying that she just locked her screen again by accident, and her face will show up again. You think about getting upset at her for doing this, to tell her just to be present, but then you say nothing and start taking screenshots too. For what seems like forever, you're all just taking screenshots of each other, saying nothing in a quiet agreement, just saving screenshots, knowing that they won't matter, but not knowing what else to do. And then your call gets disconnected. You try to call back, and you do connect, but the video is a useless pixelated blur, and the audio is choppy. But through it, you can still tell your mom is taking screenshots of the call. Then the call gets disconnected again, and this time you can't call back. You can't get any signal. You check your data and it's gone. The network has been disconnected or maybe overloaded, but either way, it's the same outcome to you.
9.
Minute 13. Opening your phone to check the news and feeling the brief final moment of uncertainty and doubt you will ever feel. The last time you'll ever think, this can't be real, can it? With any amount of trust in your own disbelief.
8.
Minute 9. Crying not in fear, but as a way to distract yourself from fear.
7.
Minute 8. The clarity of feeling everything you thought you cared about sloughing off of you, slipping away, leaving you dizzy, disoriented with a feeling of lightness. There is so little that truly matters, isn't there? And what remains is real. And now at least you can live the rest of your life knowing with certainty that what remains is what is truly important to you.
6.
Minute 6. On the FaceTime call with your family. Hey, are you okay? Yeah, I don't know. Yes, are you? We love you. Is Dad okay? I'm okay. Is Chris okay? We're trying to call him. He's not answering. No. Okay, I love you. We love you. Wait, he's calling. Let me loop him in. Hey, I'm scared. I tried to reach you. We're here. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you.
5.
Minute 3. Realizing the reason she took those screenshots was because she will be looking at those as the world ends. Then being overwhelmed with gratitude, you take out your phone and look at your own screenshots. You wish you had more photos of them, but at least you have these. Then crying again, not in fear, but as a way to connect yourself to love, knowing that the ones you love are crying too.
4.
Minute 14. Realizing that you are, through some small or quite large miracle, finding all of this out while sitting in the same room as the person you love, who you have committed to loving, who you have chosen to spend the rest of your life with, and realizing, for better or for worse, that this is it.
3.
Minute 2. Turning off your phone, looking at the person you love, and declaring the things that matter most to you.
2.
Minute 1. Reaching a state of calm and accepting that all you've done with your time on earth is enough, because it must be enough, because it is all that it will ever be.
1.
Minute 12. Laughing at a good meme about the end of the world you saw online while you were in the middle of figuring out what was going on. The end. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah, for also bullying me into reading that one. That is, that's a very difficult one to read. So thank you for letting me share that. And then I just have one more, just so we don't feel like, oh, okay, let's start talking now. But yeah, a sad listicle. I'm very proud of that. Okay, this last piece is called The Tree Outside My Therapist's Office. I'm visiting Cambridge for a couple of days. I used to live here and I do not live here anymore. I'm standing in front of the tree that used to bloom in the spring outside of my therapist's office. It is still here, still standing too. I used to walk past this tree on the way to my therapist every week, and it used to bring me joy and calm. I would think, you're still here and I'm still here. That makes two of us, okay? And in the winters, when I would walk by it, it would stand barren. In the winters, I'd be so convinced of its stillness that I would be overwhelmed with the thought, it would be so easy for you and for every other tree to just stay as you are and never grow leaves ever again. What's stopping you from just stopping completely? And today, in the course of my visiting, I found myself wondering about this tree. And I found myself taking a detour through the area just to see if this tree was still there. And it brings me immense joy and relief to see that the tree still is, even as other things I remember about this place are not. And today just happens to be a day in the spring. So the tree is covered in its own flowers, blooming as if to say, don't worry about me, I'm just doing tree stuff, like always. Worry about yourself, maybe. Stop moving around so much, maybe. It's making me tired. Just sit still in the sun for a couple of weeks. Trust me, it'll feel nice. I believe that the things you notice, that you love, that make you pause, make up who you are. And so it feels in a way like those things are part of you, even though they are outside of you, which makes me wonder if it would be more accurate to say perhaps that a piece of you is kept alive by a part of them. I wonder how many other people think about this tree or remember it when they think about this street or this neighborhood or this city. I wonder how many other people stood among its low branches and giant flowers in the spring and felt surrounded by it and thought for just a moment, nothing else matters. I'm surrounded by flowers blooming on the branches of a tree in the spring, and I am in the sun, and everything will be fine. And of course, everything will not be fine. But I believe that what defines us in part are the things we draw ourselves to that make us believe that they might, for a brief moment, be okay. They say that you're alive for as long as someone remembers something about you. I would like to believe that a home remembers you for as long as one thing you remember of it is still there. That's it. Thank you very much.
Hooray!
Hey.
Thank you for reading those. Thank you for reading even the heavy listicle. I love that one so much. There are multiple essays in this book that made me cry. And that essay made me cry and then full-hearted just lose it laughing at the end. And I was like, I shook my fist in the air and said, you, Jonny Sun, hitting me in the emotions. But no, I love hearing you read. You're a wonderful reader of your own work. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have so many questions that I want to ask.
All right, let's do it.
Throw them your way. And then everybody else, if I miss things, which I will, make sure you put your questions in the little Q&A box. So, Jonny, to start with, I'm a big fan of always talking about siblings and specifically like the siblings of the art we make. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about like whose art this book is in conversation with, like other books informed the way you approached this book. What were you reading, or what were you, absorbing when like you think of this sitting on the shelf next to other books? Who are the other books that it sits next to? Or also like if someone reads this and adores it and is like, now what should I read?
Right.
What should they read next?
Okay, there are a lot of answers to this. Mainly because I was trying to figure out like what type of book I wanted to write, and this sort of became that book. But it really felt like formally and structurally, I wanted to do something that felt in between, like a collection of essays, obviously, and a memoir, but also like a poetry collection, even though I don't write poetry and feel like I don't know how to. And so I was like, this is a collection of prose that sort of feels that way. And I wanted to shout out your work, Sarah, because you were like the first poet that I really came to know. And I'm very grateful for your books and your work. And aside from that, I have a few over here. But one book that really stunned me when it came out a couple of years ago, when I was in the middle of trying to figure out what this book should be, is this book called The Book of Delights by Ross Gay, who, when this came out and I started reading it, I was like, oh shit, someone did it. someone did the thing that I had.
Funny, that's how you know you are a poet, because every poet I know has that response to Ross Gay.
Okay, great, perfect. And it's just gorgeous, and it's also, I think, formally the thing that I love is that they are very short pieces. This is like a 2-page essay, and what I loved about it is they all felt like their own pieces, but also felt they were in conversation with each other. And throughout reading them, you plot out, or you can sort of feel out the narratives happening in the background, and kind of like the stuff that was going on in his life in the background, which I really loved and wanted to get that feeling across too. I also love this book by Sarah Rule, the playwright, called 100 Essays I Don't Have Time to Write. on umbrellas and sword fight parades and dogs, fire alarms, children, and theater. It is on its face a book about like theater theory essentially, and like a bunch of theses that Sarah Rule has about theater. But really, I think it kind of does the same thing where she's talking about one topic and kind of exploring it, but through her writing, you really get a sense of like her life and kind of the broader pieces of it and kind of the recurring themes that she keeps circling. And then the other book I was trying to find that I don't know where it is right now is Ongoingness, The End of a Diary by Sarah Manguso, which does the same, well, like similar things of like asking these big questions, but without saying them explicitly. And it kind of just feels like through all these very short pieces. I was clearly interested in like short pieces, but like through all these short pieces, it feels like you're circling and circling. And the more you read, the more the pieces circle with each other until you kind of know, you feel like you're in that person's mind asking those questions without like fully articulating it. So I think like that's sort of the space that I was interested in.
Yeah, and nailed, by the way. So good job. So, okay, those are fantastic literary siblings for this book. And we are here today to like celebrate you as an author. But I also feel it's very important to note that you are like one of the most multi-talented, polymath, pain in the ass people that I know, which is to say like you are a celebrated author and a musician and a humorist and a screenwriter and an architect and a designer and an improv artist. And, you know, like the list is endless. And I think all of those parts of you and the parts of you I didn't list inform, you know, what shows up in this book for sure. I'm curious if there are any non-literary influences that like wouldn't be obvious to a reader to know, but that like your absorption of, I don't know, a specific aesthetic or a way of looking at the world from an artist or a musician, or that you like listen to the album while you wrote, or like just what else were you soaking in from non-literary talent that like other people maybe don't see the fingerprints of on this book, but you're like, oh yeah, this book has, you know.
Sure. Yeah. That's a great question. I think, well, I think formally, I also like think about this as like an album in a way, even though it kind of feels silly, I think, to say that, but like the idea of like a collection of songs, of these like short kind of musical pieces, also having different textures and having different rhythms, and kind of understanding understanding the sequencing of the songs on an album, I think is really important to me. I love listening to albums like all the way through and like finding the weird resonancies and like the weird contrasts. And even though most albums are not narrative, there is a sense of beginning and middle and end just through like the feeling of it. And I wanted to get that feeling across. I think a lot of kind of my work is informed by sketch comedy as well, which is sort of the thing I started. That's how I started writing. I kind of loved like Derek comedy and The Lonely Island and Good Neighbor, and that's how like I made my best friend was someone who I wrote sketch comedy with, and we sort of like that was our workshop, was we wrote sketches to each other and sent them, and then later on in my life in college, I was part of a sketch comedy show, which is where I met my wife, Elisa. And we got the opportunity to make a show together where like, it really was that feeling of like, we have a bunch of sketches. How do we like sequence them in any sort of order for like a 2-hour show that makes sense and that narratively still feels like emotionally satisfying, even though there's no direct narrative. So that was like a challenge that I think I continue to revisit. I'm trying to think of what else. Oh, and then like weirdly, kind of like social media as a narrative structure more than anything, of this idea that like, and this is what I was doing with my first book too, but like the idea that on Instagram or Twitter, you're following 100, 1,000 people at the same time, and you are getting all these updates from them as they happen, and they're all kind of jumbled in with each other. And in your head, you kind of have to keep track of like, oh, I sort of know what Sarah's like going through. And so like when I see her tweet, I kind of can place it in like the narrative of like her life, of my understanding of it. And then I see what these other people are going through. And then sometimes there's resonancy, right? Like whether it's around a major event or there's just something in the air that day and you're like, oh, I can sort of see how all these like disparate tweets sort of have some sort of parallel. And I kind of wanted to have that feeling too with like this book kind of feels like it's asking or it's talking about a bunch of themes, but I wanted them all to feel like they were overlapping and sort of like superpositioned on top of each other in the way that I think our brains kind of perceive the internet. So
Love that. And that is like a pretty good transition to the next set of questions I want to ask you, which is about the process of making this book. So you already touched a little bit on sequencing. So the coming off of sequencing, my question is like, I believe that you put as much thought into the sequencing of these essays as musicians put into the sequencing of an album. I think you can really feel that. And so then my question is like, in the writing of this, is it that you just like wrote essays here, there, and everywhere whenever you could, and then there was a day where you printed them all out and you put them on the floor and you moved them around like this, and then you were like, what about this order? And then you did it again, or were you like, okay, one theme is, production and work, and so I'm going to write like all these different essays on production and work and put them over there, and then I'm going to write a bunch of essays on anxiety and put them over here. Like, how did the sequencing go?
Yeah. Can I ask you how you sequence your work as well?
Yes.
Is that allowed?
Yes, you could ask that question. Mine is the former. Mine is I write columns, I print them out, I put them on the floor, I move them around like this, and I see if that works, and then I move them around again, and then I send them to Kristen and see what she thinks of the order, and then I find an order that way. Yeah.
I think that's how I did it as well. I was reading like the other day about this thing called student syndrome, which is I think like a description of the phenomenon of like even after you're done with school, there's still a tendency for some people to like leave things until the last minute to create.
That we're calling that students.
Apparently,
I'm pretty sure that's just like human syndrome,
right? Yeah, but like the idea of like you have to create enough terrifying stress in order to get something done. And so I relate to the first way of like I was kind of just writing, and I was writing kind of notes and thoughts even before I knew this was going to be a book. And I had collected like 200 or 300 little like iPhone notes, not fully written, just like, oh, it'd be cool if like I thought sadness was related to a bird or something, or like a note of like a listicle but really sad. And I sort of like had those going. And it was like this fun thing to do. And Elisa at some point was like, this should be your next book because you're trying to figure out what your next book is going to be. And I thought that was very wise. And I took her advice, like I always do. And so that kind of became it. And then in terms of the sequencing, there was like, I have this folder of all these things of like, this is like a fifth of it. But I printed out everything and then I sort of wrote, like, look at this one. Sorry, I'm just like discovering this. Like I printed this out, crossed out the entire page, and then wrote the essay in the margins.
That's rad.
Of the crossed out page. But that was kind of, I actually spent, I think, one day figuring out the sequencing for all of it because it was due the next day. I was like, I'm going to do it. I ended up staying up till like 6 a.m, which is not a good thing. And I don't even want to mention that because I don't want to glorify that. But that sort of became the rough feeling of the book. And in terms of like the themes that kind of come up, I didn't pre-choose any of that, but it sort of felt like here are the themes that kept recurring naturally as I was writing down my thoughts and trying to figure out what things were. And so those sort of became things that were like, hey, pick me, like look over here, this is maybe something you want to talk about. And I think the editing process is really helpful in terms of just like learning to focus on those things and sort of like delete and like cut and edit away the stuff that wasn't helping kind of like these central ideas.
Cool. Okay, there's also very beautiful illustrations in this book.
Thank you.
And I was wondering when you know illustration is going to be a part of an essay,
Mhm.
how early? I guess, like, for example,
Yeah.
a lot of time, like I have poems that like pretty early on in the poem writing process, I'm like, I think I want to perform this poem. Like, I think this is a poem I'm going to want to say out loud. And if I know that early enough, then like in the writing process, I have a sort of whole toolbox that I can be thinking about, like,
Mm.
what am I going to be doing with my hands? What am I going to be doing with my face? What is my tone going to sound like? Like, how can I express the meaning of these moments in this poem using the tools of performance, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes I'm wrong, by the way. Sometimes I'm like, this poem is for the page. And then I read it later and I'm like, oh, maybe I should perform this, or vice versa, right?
Right.
So it's not a science. But sometimes if I early enough, I'm like, I think this is going to be a performance piece. So as I'm writing it out, I'm like, I keep those tools in my head. So when you're like right away, I want to write an essay that's about birds as metaphor for bird watching, as metaphor for sadness.
Yeah.
Like, where you, because you could have described that without illustrations. And there's beautiful writing in this book in which you conjure imagery that you do not draw, right?
Mhm.
So what is it that you look for to tell you that an essay wants to have illustration?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's I'm also gonna grab my galley. This is the like benefit of doing
Show and tell.
like I can grab things. But this is fun because like I used this like advanced reader's copy as like a way to like be like, oh, I actually want to add like a drawing here and do a little sketch. Or like,
wait a second, they were letting you add drawings as
I know, I feel like I'm like
as the advanced reader's copy. Wow, huge reveal.
I'm very sorry. Here's an example of a book, an essay that like I had wanted to figure out how to draw forever, about like being stuck in an endless hallway. And you can see through the margins of like me trying to figure this out. And then eventually in the final book, there are no illustrations for that one, because I realized like the reason I was having so much difficulty with the drawings is because I already said what I needed to say in the words, that like the drawings felt like unnecessary or like extraneous. But I think, and then here's one where like I had written it and then I was like, I actually want to add drawings to this. But I think a lot of it is sort of intuitive. A lot of it is, I'm very grateful that I like have that I had like a publisher who was like, you should put illustrations in this book. That's part of your like toolbox. And like, I'm grateful for like the fact that that was part of how I thought about this book. And so like my brain was always thinking about like if things should be said in image or words. But it sort of is just a feeling. I think eventually most of the plant essays, of which there are like a number of them throughout, ended up becoming illustrated, because I think that tied to this feeling of like, there's an essay in here about how like I enjoy drawing plants because it's like about noticing things that might go unnoticed. But I made a conscious choice. There's an essay about this plant that my grandfather used to have, that when he died, my grandma continued taking care of it, that I did not draw, because I wanted that one to feel like it wasn't as tangible. Like I wanted that one to feel like it existed in memory and it was a little blurry. So I made sure not to draw that one, for example. But it's kind of like a feeling.
Yeah. I was going to say that the choice to not draw the hallway essay is so strong to me, because it's like, I mean, this is a weird comparison maybe, but like in horror movies, the scariest horror movies are when you like don't see the monster, and then the monster in your head is so terrible, like you can't, nothing will ever be as scary as the thing, right? So like an endless hallway and like what it means in the context of that essay, we all have like a version of our own wall opening and the endless hallway, and like we can see it so clearly of our own lives, that you like pinning it down with a visual would maybe have done it a disservice when you do it so much justice in the language. And I love the idea of like your grandfather's plant having that level of gravity and like sacredness in some ways, which is not to say that like the drawings are for the mundane, but I do think that there's something very powerful about like what you choose to illustrate and give us visuals for, and then what you choose not to. I just thought it was, and now that I know that you did it, you know, in the advanced readers copy late in the game, the answer is, when did you know you wanted to put illustrations? The night before. That's the answer.
Yeah, essentially past the night before.
That's really outrageous. I'm learning so much about the publishing industry tonight. Okay, let's see. How are we doing on time? I want to be mindful. I hope you are all dropping your questions into the Q&A box. Maybe, oh no, I have so many more questions I want to ask you, but I want to give time to other people. Okay, well, maybe some other people will ask the questions that I want to ask, and then I'll feel okay. And then if nobody asks the question I want to ask, I'm going to steal it back and ask you my questions. How about that?
Sounds great.
Okay, great. All right, let's look. Here we go. All right, so somebody asked, a lot of people want to know about the plants on our shelves, which is very sweet.
Okay. This is a heart-shaped philodendron.
Amazing.
Which it's actually like this is a bit of a secret, but this plant is a pothos, but I also like referenced heart-shaped philodendrons in the drawing of it because I liked the idea that you sort of like evoke these little hearts throughout, and then that this is sort of like a fallen heart on the copy on the front. But I was like, the curliness of these leaves is more of a philodendron thing than a pothos thing. But I kind of mixed them together. So
expect a lot of angry letters.
You know, from both the Pothos fan community and the philodendron fan community.
We hear you, philodendron community. Okay, so for example, I like this question. Miguel wants to know answer live. Whether it be lines of a poem or dialogue between an alien and his friends, what's your process for boiling down a big, intangible idea into simple, digestible language?
That is a great question. So I won't say the long answer, but the medium answer is, I think like the biggest criticism that I sort of faced in early writing when I was writing sketch and kind of like short plays and stuff was that like my sketches were too long. That like we'd try to run some sketches and they'd be like 10 minutes, and then it's kind of like, this is a short play, this is not a sketch. And so I think I kind of went the other direction when I started writing jokes on Twitter and kind of being drawn to that of like, how do you get the shortest element of that? Like, how do you distill everything down to the shortest thing? And I think like in a way, Twitter became sort of like a writing workshop for me to learn how to like, I learned that like everything can be shorter. And then sort of as I kind of continued on in my career as a writer, when I started writing like episodes for TV and stuff, again, I came across the problem of like, the scripts are too long, of like, I'm trying to fit like a 25-minute episode into 40 pages, which is not, that's too many pages. But I think like, there's always this thing in my head of like, how do you get, what can you cut away and how do you keep just the essence of it? And also I think the other part of it is that as a writer and almost as a reader in a bad way, I feel like I don't have the attention span a lot of the time. And that's just, I think that has like, those are for personal reasons. And also I think I'm constantly like overwhelmed with stuff that like, for me, I enjoy getting to the shorter thing, because if I can have a shorter piece in a way, there's like less for me to have to like build up to getting back in the piece in order to know how to edit it. That it's almost like a utilitarian thing of like, if it's a shorter piece, I'm able to get back into the piece a bit easier and sort of live in the piece a little bit easier. So yeah, I think that's yeah.
I love that answer. And also I'm going to use that as an excuse to ask you one of my questions, because it's a pretty good lead in. I think it's related because it's related to the way I would answer this question, which is, we both really, something we've bonded over before is we both like really love form. We get like really, really into form and like the celebration and study of form, whether you know, in poetry there are form poems, right? Like there are rules to what a sestina is, like there are rules to what a pantoum is, and if you're going to write in a poetic form, you have to like know what the form requirements are, right? But outside of poetry, there's like a form in what a meme is, there's a form in like what a punchline joke setup is, right? Like, and you are someone who I have known for years to like recognize a form, study the form, like try to perfect or at least participate in the form, and then explore the like boundaries and expansion of the form. And I think that is also an answer to the question of like, how do you take something big and make it tangible or smaller? My answer is like, a lot of times the restriction of form is so helpful, right? Like if your instinct is to write 55 pages, if you're trying to do a BuzzFeed listicle, we all know that like BuzzFeed listicles aren't that long. Like you get 15 max. So like there's the form and that's what you have to work it, right? Or like if you're going to write an essay in the form of a series of recipes, like that can't be 75 pages. It has to be like a certain number of recipes in order to feel like it is a respectful of the form, right? So I think like this is leading to a question, I promise.
Yeah, no, I just love hearing you talk. You can talk for the rest of the time.
My question is, in this book, you have sort of open form essays, and then you also have a few essays that like might go under the category of lyric essay, or like essays where you clearly have like chosen a form like BuzzFeed listicle or like recipe, right? And I want to know about like how form was a part of this project. Was it like, I know I want to write about the end of the world, what form would it work with? Was it like, I know I want to play with the listicle form and how can I make it sad, right? Like maybe we've talked about that one, but like maybe the scrambled egg essay is a good one. Like, were you like, I want to write about my family, like what form can I put it in? Or were you like, what if I wrote a series of recipes? I wonder what story will come out of that. Like, does form lead, or does like content message lead, and then you like look for the box to place it in?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I feel like for me, a lot of it comes from like form leading. I think that's like also an architecture answer of like function follows form, or form over function, which is an architect thing, I guess. But definitely with the pieces in the book that ended up like kind of being in the book, I think the initial excitement was like, ooh, I like this form, and like how do I, like, what is a way that I can write within it? So Sarah's referencing this kind of series of, or this essay that's a series of like recipes about eggs at its face, and every kind of little piece is a memory from my life that revolves around a certain egg dish, but it's kind of listed and there's ingredients on the side that are all like mom and brother and like coloring book and stuff. But that piece really started as like a 2-pager of like, wouldn't it be funny to just talk about how, like, to do a recipe for scrambled eggs where you talk about the fact that like when I'm cooking scrambled eggs, I kind of let the slowness of that let my mind drift. And that was it. That was supposed to be like, keep stirring the egg fluid, let your mind drift, stir noting like the things you're thinking of, and then the eggs are done. Like it was supposed to be like a mental recipe instead of like a physical recipe. But then I kept kind of writing, and I kept kind of playing with that, and found like, oh, there's more and more to explore there, of like, if my mind's going to drift, where does it drift to? And like the title is called How to Cook Scrambled Eggs. And then every recipe in this essay is a different egg recipe. And so in a way I was also like, oh, this is fun because the scrambled eggs are actually like all the eggs I remember being scrambled in my head. And also literally scrambled eggs that bookend the piece.
Mhm.
But I think in general, there's always like that play of form, and like I think you alluded to it, but yeah, we like I enjoy the form of the meme, the internet meme, and like the idea of like the fact that something can happen so quickly that everyone understands and that everyone sort of knows the rules of, and within those rules you can really say a bunch of different things. And so yeah, I don't know, I love that.
Me too. That sort of answers, although I don't know if you want to throw another answer towards this, but Cassidy wanted to know, how does your background in architecture inform or influence your writing? Do you
Oh,
feel like
yeah.
that's the emphasis on structure?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's part of it. This book was different because I didn't really outline anything, and like it kind of felt like I wrote it all and then tried to edit it. But in general, I think my writing, especially on like the TV side and the film side, is very structure driven, and I love structure. And also like even looking at the short pieces, I think like getting into like reading Ross Gay's book or like Hanif's essays, Hanif Abdurrahim's essays, a friend of ours, and kind of these short pieces. Looking at structure is really fun because you're like, oh, where along this thing is like the turn in a way. And I learned early on in sketch the idea of like the setup and then like the tilt and then like the turn or the punchline or something. I think I'm butchering that structure, but there's a great thing. It's exciting to know that everything that sort of exists in a structure, and that these structures sort of repeat all the time. And it's fun to like identify them and then be able to play with them. And then also with the drawings, I feel like I'm talking so much, but I guess that's why you're
But we're here.
But then in the drawings, like I also really was excited about like doing these like plant drawings that were in this like thing that architects do, is this thing called the axon drawing, the like axonometric drawing of like basically you're looking at like the Sim City kind of like video game technical drawing. And for me, I was like, oh, what if I did a bunch of technical drawings of these very untechnical things, like houseplants, like this air plant sitting in like a Tupperware container. But I applied, or this yogurt one that I'm going to find, these like very technical drawings of a cup of yogurt. But the joy of that was like, oh, I still like, for this one, I still like structured it out. Like I drew all the like ellipses and like made sure that it worked as an axonometric drawing. And then instead of it being like a building or like a motor part, it's a cup of yogurt, which is just as important. So yeah.
Hear that, parents? The engineering and the architecture paid off.
Yes, I can draw plants and yogurt cups, and it delights me.
I love that. And I'm also noticing now in a lot of these questions, I feel like we've actually answered a lot of these, which makes me feel good. Alice wanted to know who inspires you. I feel like we talked about that at the beginning, but you've also just been mentioning a bunch of people as we go through it. The books are some of the books on our bookshelves. You even shared some of the books on your bookshelves. So we've gotten through that. There's a couple questions here that are kind of similar to each other, which sort of are, Raquel wants to know, how do you manage to find grace when writing about issues that make you sad or angry? Scarlett also wants to know, what advice do you give writers who are experiencing burnout, or how do you feel inspired when these feelings arise? Miranda also wanted to ask about how both of us cherish small joys in our work. And like, how have we found that in this particularly challenging year? So I guess, these are different questions, but I think they're all sort of cycling around like joy and hope in the face of what is neither of those things. And I would take it one step further, which is that I think you, especially in this book, one thing I was so impressed with and surprised by is that you're so funny. And so much of the work that you have in the world that people know you for is humor writing. Your Twitter account was first a sort of humor avatar. Your work on BoJack is so funny and brilliant. Everyone's an Alien is very funny. And so I think maybe I walked into this book being like, here we go, a barrel of laughs. And like, there's definitely humor in this book, and there's definitely like wonderful moments that I truly laughed out loud. But this book is facing a lot of what isn't joyful, or what is hard, or what is sad, or what is anxious making, and yet also makes a lot of room for small joys. So I don't know if there's a question, if one of those specific questions speak to you, but talk about it.
Yeah, I think okay, there's a few things. I think one thing is that like I really have, just from like a personal and emotional level, I think as soon as as soon as somebody encouraged me to write, as soon as like my drama teacher when I was in high school was like, you can write, or my friend who I met in high school, was like, oh, I like your sketches, do you like mine, and like, can we share them and talk about them? And even before that, when my like mom encouraged me to write stories when I was a kid, I think as soon as I like figured out that was a way to figure things out, that became the thing of like, whatever emotion I'm feeling. I used to stay up like all night writing little song lyrics in a notebook when I was like 14 years old. And it sort of became this way to help me process things, and to, in a way, I think there was part of the question was like, how do you find grace when writing about issues that make you sad or angry, which feels like that's how I do it. It's like whatever feels upsetting at the time, if I'm able to find the time to like sit down and write about it and put words to it, and also just like understand my feelings a little more, sometimes that like helps me clarify the anger, right? And it helps me, sometimes it helps me like understand what is really upsetting me, and being able to
Identify the birds.
yeah, exactly. And then just identify all those feelings on a personal level really help. And then I think there's a part of it that I discovered online and then through my first book, was this idea that like being able to share that stuff also feels like a joy and a connection, because I think so much of what I tend to write about and focus on is stuff that bothers me, and stuff that like I'm trying to deal with or work out. And the fact that like other people can read that and be like, wait, I know this feeling too, and I'm like trying to feel my way through it, really just makes me feel like, okay, I'm not the only person. And suddenly it's like this, it becomes this, it's taking like this thing that feels isolating and turning it into a thing that feels connecting instead. Which I found that like the more specific I get and the more kind of like particular I focus on making these things, I feel like in a way the more other folks might be able to identify with it, or even the more that I'm able to like identify with it. So I think there's just something nice and calming about being able to do that. I think that feels like it covered
Yes.
a bunch of those things. Yeah.
And I think that you really accomplished, like reading this book, I was like, oh no, it's like the spider, speaking of memes, it's the Spider-Man meme
Yeah.
of me being like, that every description of every metaphor that you could find to talk about anxiety or to talk about production or all of these things feels like just so helpful to find language for, to like be like, I know this feeling, I have felt it too, but I would not have thought to call it the visiting of birds. And yeah, I think that is a real gift that you have given those of us with anxious brains. So thank you very much. Okay, we covered so many questions. We're like almost over time. With everyone's permission, I want to end with like the fastest. I'm going to try to do it in like 3 minutes.
Great.
But I want to ask you my like speed round questions. You're not allowed to think of your answer for more than like 10 seconds. Okay, here we go.
Perfect. Yeah.
Jonny Sun speed round. Here we go. I go to a magical restaurant that has everything in the world, and I order the Jonny Sun.
Oh my God.
What is it?
Oh no, oh boy. Okay, there's a Sichuan kind of fish dish. I always forget what it's called, and I have to ask my parents what it is, but it's like a stewed fish with like spicy oil and sour vegetables. You know that? There's also at the moment pasta alla vodka, which is the thing that Elisa and I always get whenever we go to an Italian place. Ethiopian food.
Yes.
Specifically fasolia, which is like.
So the Jonny Sun is really just like a feast.
It's everything. Yeah, I'm listing every single.
They bring you everything on the menu. You go to the Jonny Sun, they bring you one of everything.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, I love it. Here we go. If you were a houseplant, what houseplant would you be?
Oh, that's a great question. Currently, I feel like it's this aloe that's in the corner of our place, which looks a little sad, but the reason is because as soon as we moved to LA, I am kind of like, why do we own succulents? We can walk outside and see like this aloe, but it's 8 feet tall. And suddenly I feel bad that I have this in our house because its friends are out there thriving and this looks like this. So
amazing. Okay. Next question. If I were a houseplant, what houseplant would I be?
Oh man, I think you'd be like those ferns that kind of like feel like they are kind of in every direction, and also I don't know if ferns are surprisingly hardy. I think most of them aren't, but I think there are a few that I've encountered in my life that are like, oh, this thing has survived everything.
Okay.
And I think that's you.
I love it. What is the hardest thing to draw?
I think people. I think like there's a reason there have been no humans in any of the things we've drawn, because I think I'm still working on it and I don't know how to do it. And so I did a whole book about Lynn and never. Well, I guess I drew his face on the back actually, so I think that's fine. Look at this.
You got one. There you go.
Yeah, we did the two of us, but I don't think that looks particularly like me. But yeah, the human faces, I think.
Okay. If you were to be reborn as a building, what architect should design you? Past or present, living or dead?
My hot take is that no architects should design anything anymore, that there is a reason that I left architecture
the hottest take
as a field. Yeah.
Okay, when you are doodling, when you're like bored and you're doodling with your pen, what's the most common thing that's coming out of your pen?
Either leaves or hands. I love drawing hands. I think like hands for me are not a hard thing to draw. Hands like are so fun because they're all about structure, right? Like you have to understand all the geometries of it in order to do it. So whenever I need like a warm up, I think I tend to draw hands.
Amazing. Okay, last question. Who is an artist in any medium or media that you think more people should know about and look up?
Oh no, I'm gonna like, I don't know. Oh gosh, I don't know how to answer this question.
Who were you listening to? What music were you just listening to that you were like, man, more people should listen to this song?
I really like Joy Oladukin, who is she's lovely.
You did it. Okay, that's the speed round.
Amazing. This is so fun.
You guys, speed rounds are the best. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. I feel like, Sarah, we should ask you though, what's an artist creating something that you would like all of us to know about as well?
Oh, heavens. You're right. It's a hard question.
Give you a taste of your own medicine here.
Yeah.
Jensen McCrae is a young singer-songwriter, and she has a song called Immune that is like the spring anthem. Those of you who are making your vaccine appointments, I hope you listen to it as you walk to your appointment. That's my plug.
Awesome. Awesome. I love it. I love it. Well, and Sarah, I want to ask both of you before we go. Sarah, what are you working on next?
Oh man. I am supposed to be writing a book.
Instead, you are coming up with excellent speedrun questions.
I cannot tell you any more about it yet, but that's what I'm supposed to be doing.
We have that to look forward to then. Jonny, I know this is just launch day for your next book, so it feels a little premature to ask, but we all want to know what's on the horizon for you. Anything you can tell us about?
That's a great question. I think I would like to write another book. I am figuring out.
So would we. We would like you to write another book.
Thank you. And then the other slightly mysterious answer is there's nothing I'm allowed to talk about, but there are many things that I might not be allowed, or that I'm not allowed to talk about that might exist one day.
Fantastic.
And that is very exciting.
Yes, I love those answers because that gives us excited, hopeful things that we can brainstorm on our own time. I love it. I love it. All right. Well, I'm going to drop the link in the chat again. If anybody still needs a signed copy, they are available. I know the website, it's going to look like we don't have that many, but I promise that we do. We'll get any number that anybody wants. So let's go ahead and let's buy all kinds of copies of this book so that we can get it on the bestseller list and encourage Jonny to write some more and grace us with his wit and wisdom. Sarah and Jonny, this has been really, really fun and really moving and just so much of sharing of like, I feel that too. Which is fantastic. So thank you both for sharing all of that with us and for sharing your time. To everyone joining us, thank you as well for sharing your time. And just a quick housekeeping note, if you did purchase a copy of the book, you'll get an email from me a la event combo that will tell you when it is ready to either be picked up or that we're ready to ship it out to you. So just hang tight till we get that for you.
Oh wait, will somebody take a screenshot of us holding the book?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And then that way we can post it as a reminder for
I'm gonna turn my video off. So that we can do that because
too, Ginny.
No,
wait,
that's quite all right.
wait,
Here, I'm
I know how
taking
to
one
do
right
it.
now. All right, ready? 3, 2, 1. Yay. All right. Your publicist is on this call, so I know that she'll be happy that I did that.
Hooray.
Fantastic.
Jonny,
So
guess what? Your book is now out.
yes, happy birthday.
Hooray.
Fantastic. Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all so much for being with us. We really appreciate it. Everybody stay safe out there. Yes, get your vaccine appointments and happy reading. Okay.
Bye,
Have a good night. Thanks, everybody.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.